solar companies and some of the wind companies in China that have done well. There may be a few people involved in some of the LED technology companies. There are some individuals there, but home runs like the Zuckerberg guys spewing out billions. I don't think there's a large number of that. And the problem here is this business, like you said, this is not something that sort of scales like a software plant, right? Where you can push the button and the product replicates itself. Right? This is something that is nuts and bolts, hardware, thermodynamics, takes time for this sort of stuff to move forward. Now that said, you sort of have to separate, in my view, you're investing in companies and trying to make money as an investor in companies from you're investing in projects. Okay? And the project world has, I think, a lot of room now for financing activities. Okay? And the project world is, let's face it, it's dominated primarily by solar and wind. Okay? There's some other niche things. There's a fuel and geothermal things going on here. There's a couple of people who are still building some biomass facilities to make ethanol or offshoots of other bioproducts. Okay, so there's some other project-oriented financing activity. But the big home runs right now are investing in solar projects. Okay, in the United States, if I'm correct, you can't get a tax refund anymore, right? That didn't get extended.
It got extended.
It got extended to the end of the year.
The refund.
Yeah. This is the cash grant.
Yeah.
So you don't really need a tax equity partner, right?
You don't, except
back.
the difference is about 10% in equity into the deal. So let's say if you don't have a cash as a sponsor, and you invite a tax equity fund to come in, they'll put 40%, but then they'll get 30% of the cash.
Yeah.
And then they'll get, how they make up on the 10% is through tax write-offs.
Yeah. Just to kind of go back, so there's clearly some opportunities in project financing. And the solar thing, I would expect that this to be perfected and turned into kind of a project machine after a while. That's being done at the residential level through the solar leasing programs, right? On the larger scale, utility size things, it's going to be these financing structures like your bank. I would expect to see that sort of thing roll along, and there should be some businesses growing and getting bigger and doing more and more and more of those things. The wind things are big deals. Okay, I don't think there are lots of small new wind projects. Okay, and Lewis has got an interesting angle on. I know you're in San Leandro, you're kind of next to Altamont Pass, which has got a lot of really shitty old land turbines in it, right? There's a whole bunch of shitty turbines down in Southern California.
We can blame that out, right?
Whatever. So, there's some niche opportunities like that, which are great. You can build great businesses on those opportunities. But project financing is good. And there's a problem on financing in the energy efficiency space as well, right? Somebody has to come up with the cash for these things. The payback is through savings going forward in time, right? Those savings may not accrue to the people. There may be lessees who are paying the bills, right? So the building owner isn't paying the bills. So there's issues with financing in that area. I think there'll be some interesting opportunities for project financing in that area.
One area I can maybe address, since we're talking about equity financing, is on the SBA side. There's equity financing side of SBA. I don't know whether any of you are familiar with a organization called Small Business Investment Corporations, SBICs. Think of it as venture capitalist firms. Usually they're smaller in scale. They're all nonprofit organizations. There are well over 100 of them across the country, and they tend to kind of cluster based on their area of expertise. If you go to their website, each company, they will say, we specialize in this sector, this sector, this sector. And I haven't looked up recently to see whether or not there are enough companies that will specialize in clean energy. I foresee that's an opportunity for some of you, because maybe you can form an SBIC. It doesn't take much. You don't need money. Why? Because I believe the fund comes from the government, just like SBA. It's a guarantee program, and the government foresaw this issue with private VCs being very selective about which companies they want to go after. So federal government really wanted to create a program where, kind of marginal businesses the VC wouldn't want to touch. They saw an opportunity for them to help those businesses to launch these companies. So they work exactly like VCs. They want equity stake in the company. they would review the business plan, and they would finance these projects. And I've had many clients who come to me thinking that, I do both, equity financing and debt financing. And often I will say for startup deals, for example, I read the business plan and clearly see that it's an R&D stage. It is not a mature enough company. And I say, look, you are about 2 years away from SBA financing. What you need is a VC. Why don't you try this VC down the street and down Silicon Valley? They'll call me back, a few weeks later. We met with them. They're not interested. Then I send them to SBICs. Look up, do a Google search, Wikipedia search, SBIC, Small Business Investment Corporations, and you'll find a list of over 100 of them across the country, all over the country. And so that would be a viable source for this particular industry, I would think, because based on my experience, people who can get financing through VC sometimes get financing through the right SBICs.
Let's talk a moment about this. I think Mark was helpful to kind of keep this equity side, and or I should say the technology startup side and the project finance side, kind of are two different types of financing that we're talking about. And yet they intersect, because if a technology startup company starts to grow and wants to sell their product, they're ultimately going to turn to that project financing piece to do it. But I think the point I was hearing was that, among others, is that a lot of times what we're seeing is project financing has the technology is mature enough, it's commoditized enough, where solar and wind has become effectively commoditized. And maybe water and energy efficiency plays are on the way.
A bunch of the energy efficiency things are, they work, okay? It's really an economic issue, right? And finding a home for where those investments pay out monetarily becomes the trick, as you know, in the energy efficiency.
But even Mark, some of the economic modeling, I think this is what Don was getting to, is that you work out that first Superfund deal, and you do that 3 or 4 more times, and now it's no longer going to lawyers and saying, this is, having a fight with a lawyer. The lawyer agrees it's going to work. FPL, Florida Power and Light, took on all that risk associated with the initial big wind project finance, right? And now all of a sudden, Standard & Poor's can say, yeah, this is actually, I can rate this, right? Whereas before they might not. And so, I wonder Louis, from your perspective, are you seeing that commoditizing of the wind project financing come into play for your projects? I know the big wind is out there, but are you seeing that? And how important is that to your business, that bankers like East West and Wells Fargo are comfortable with the technology and the technology risk that's actually going to be able to drive your business?
We're running a pretty small operation, so this, the VC doesn't come into it. But we see the financing from our customers' side. So we see that our customers having a little easier time getting a loan to buy our product. So that's not directly us, but we see a little more of that. There's still a lot of when you leave the Bay Area, there's still a lot of newness to clean tech. This is one of the most highly aware areas in the country. So when we're in other states, we'll see a co-op bank or a much smaller financial institution seeing a project like this for the first time. So they're looking at financing tractors. It might cost several $100,000, that kind of thing. That's what they're used to financing for a commercial farmer, which makes up maybe 40 or 50% of our client base. So they're seeing maybe buying a wind turbine is not a standard add-on to agricultural operation, but it is getting a little easier, and we've had commercial farm customers that are able to get a loan to buy a turbine, and that's important. So it does help us a lot, and that happened less, several years ago. So on this smaller scale, yes, we're seeing a little bit of an easier time the last couple of
Louis,
years.
is part of that, though, that you now can prove that your remanufactured turbines are working out? You've got some track record under your belt, so the customer goes to the bank, I've got